He cried immediately, so he knew something seriously was wrong, and he went to a friend's house. This person is a madman. It's a monster. So this person either had a stun gun or had access to one.
We had safety precautions. I would not let him go back to school in Colorado without safety precautions.
So you had people watching.
We had a 911 system put in the school. We had professional security on staff on the premises, and we had parents who were watching around the clock.
I'm Marcus Wren, creator of the Tell Index, a 50-signal system for analyzing statements and behavior in criminal cases. Today's video breaks down John and Patsy Ramsey's first live interview on CNN's Larry King Live, roughly 3 years after the murder, timed to the release of their book. 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was found dead in her family's Boulder, Colorado home on December 26, 1996. The family was cleared by DNA evidence in 2008, and the case remains unsolved. Subscribe if you want more analysis like this.
What happened to Burke? Does he stay asleep, or do you wake him up and send it? What happens to Burke?
Burke was in bed. We got him up, don't remember what time, but we had him go to a friend's house. I told him his sister was missing.
Told him the truth.
Told him the truth. We didn't try to make it as easy on as we could, but he cried immediately, so he knew something seriously was wrong, and he went to a friend's house.
He recounts that once police were at the house, they woke Burke, told him honestly that his sister was missing, and that the boy cried immediately, so he knew something seriously was wrong, before being sent to a friend's house. This is code A4C. Checking the reasonableness and consistency of a specific claim, both against its own internal logic and against other sources. On internal logic, there's something notable here. If you genuinely believe a dangerous kidnapper is still at large and fear for your remaining child's safety, a panicked parent's instinct is typically to keep that child close, under the protection of the police already on scene, not to send the child away from that exact protection. On cross-referencing against another source, the cried immediately claim also doesn't match Burke's own account 20 years later, in his 2016 interview with Dr. Phil. By Burke's own telling, when his mother burst into the room in a panic looking for his sister, he just lay still, felt safer staying there, and made no mention of crying at that point. He describes the feeling as fear, not immediate tears upon hearing the news. The crying, by Burke's own account, only came later at a distinctly different moment, when he was taken to another friend's house and his father told him JonBenet was in heaven, meaning when he learned his sister was dead, not when he first heard she was missing. These two moments are hours apart within the same morning. In other words, the crying did happen, but according to the person who did the crying, it happened at a completely different point than the one his father describes.
Why would someone send a ransom note, kidnap someone, and then kill them and leave them in the same house?
Well,
if the purpose is to get money.
Larry, this person is a madman. It's a monster. They don't think logically.
Pedophile?
We think it was a pedophile. We think it was a male. There's several key pieces of evidence that we think will lead us to the killer. Male, pedophile. We think a stun gun was involved, so this person either had a stun gun or had access to one. The number 118 had significance to this person. 118,000 was the amount of the ransom note. That was picked for a purpose. We don't know what the purpose is. SBTC meant something to this killer. That was how the ransom note was signed. And this person was in Boulder, Colorado on December 25th.
Within the same answer, when explaining the general motive of the killer, he calls the person a madman, a monster. But moments later, when listing specific physical clues, the stun gun, the $118,000 figure, the SBTC signature, being in Boulder on December 25th, the language shifts entirely to neutral. This person is repeated 4 times in a row with no emotional adjective attached. This is code A4 again, this time applying the tone criterion within the code's 4-part framework, checking whether the emotional register used to describe the same reference stays consistent throughout. This reflects a principle widely used by professional statement analysts. According to the statement analysis methodology, this exact case has been examined using this approach by dedicated statement analysis sites like statementanalysis.com. A shift between emotionally loaded language and neutral, technical language when referring to the same subject within the same answer is a notable signal, though not conclusive proof on its own. It's only fair to note, this pattern isn't perfectly consistent throughout the interview. In an earlier line, he also directly calls the suspect a madman, a monster, while discussing motive generally, not only when speaking hypothetically about the note writer. So this is a pattern worth noting specifically within the evidence listing passage, not an absolute divide running through the entire interview. One reading of this pattern, drawn directly from statement analysis practice, cursing a completely abstract kidnapper with no name and no face carries no emotional risk at all, because that figure is one they themselves constructed within the account, not a real person they have to face every day. But the moment the story touches concrete physical clues, the type of weapon, the dollar figure, the signature, presence at the scene on a specific date, details that actually point toward a specific person, even someone actively trying to sustain a fabricated account would find it hard to keep up that same harshness if that person turns out to be a member of their own family. Veteran statement analyst Mark McClish, founder of statementanalysis.com and a former instructor for U.S. federal law enforcement training, has publicly concluded about this very interview that the Ramseys' word choices indicate they know who killed John Benet, pointing to their confidence in saying they live in a safe community and will be looking for the killer for the rest of their lives. A confidence that's hard to reconcile with genuinely believing a dangerous stranger remains at large. The theory that their own son, Burke, 9 years old at the time, was the one who directly caused the death in an impulsive moment, with the parents then staging the scene to protect him, has also been publicly raised by former lead investigator James Kolar and the investigative team behind CBS's The Case of John Benet Ramsey, 2016. Set against that backdrop, harsh language appearing only around the abstract kidnapper figure, while neutral language appears exactly when the story touches concrete evidence, is a pattern consistent with that theory, though it isn't conclusive proof on its own and needs to be weighed alongside other signals before drawing any conclusion.
When we went back to Colorado, Burke finished up his 4th grade year, I would just, walk down the sidewalk or be driving along and look at every single person and wonder.
You worry about Burke at all, going to school? He went back to school, right?
Yeah.
To worry about him?
But we had safety precautions. I would not let him go back to school in Colorado without safety precautions.
So you had people
We had a
watching
911 system put in the school. We had professional security on staff on the premises, and we had parents who were watching around the clock.
He recounts that when Burke went back to school in Colorado after the case, he would not let him go back to school without safety precautions. They had a dedicated 911 system installed at the school, hired professional security staff on site, and had parents taking shifts watching around the clock. Still, Code A4, this time cross-referencing this specific action against their own action in round 1 within the very same interview. This is a notable contradiction that doesn't come from an outside source, but from 2 different answers they gave within the same interview. On the morning of the murder, believing a dangerous kidnapper was still at large, their response was to send Burke to a friend's house with no special security measure beyond simply leaving the scene where police were present, as covered in round 1. But just months later, when bringing Burke back to school, they deployed a multi-layered security system, a dedicated alarm line, professional staff, rotating parent watch. If the threat to Burke was judged serious enough to warrant that level of protection later, the question is why the very first morning, the moment when, by their own account, the threat was more immediate and pressing than at any other point, the protection given to the boy was so minimal. A story about crying immediately that doesn't match the account of the person who did the crying. A way of naming someone that shifts between monster and this person within a few sentences. A morning with almost no protective measures, and months later, an entire security system. What do you think? leave a comment below. Subscribe for more analysis in this case series.